Welcome back. A senior U.S. official tells CNN that those ICE raids that were postponed last month are now underway in at least 9 U.S. cities. I'm joined now by Raul Reyes. He is an immigration analyst and an attorney and a CNN opinion writer. Michael Wildes is a former federal prosecutor Wilds, I should say, and an immigration attorney whose clients have included First Lady Melania Trump and her parents. He's also the author of the book Safe Haven in America. Thanks to both of you. Appreciate your time. So, Michael, let me begin with you because, you know, as someone who has represented the First Lady and her parents in their legal efforts to immigrate, to the U.S. from Slovenia, is there a difference between the way they got their status versus the, so-called chain migration method that the president so vehemently opposes?
Well, first, just for background, I am a very proud Democrat. I'm actually a mayor of a city in Englewood, New Jersey. And in the greatest tradition of what our founding parents envisioned, they became green card holders and then citizens, no different than anyone else, each placed in separate rooms, asked the same questions, and when they hit 6 out of 10 right on American history, they had passed their exam. So to answer your question succinctly, they chain migrated in the way that many people do, and it doesn't allow 30 or 40 different relatives to come here. And they did it so that the First Lady would have their babysitting services, as she explained. And she explained that the president's intention is to do otherwise. And the raids that we're seeing right now, while not stealth, are not within the same character of what our founding fathers envisioned.
So when the president has criticized chain migration, he's not differentiating the variations of chain migration. He says, that it should be eliminated. Chain migration is wrong, should be eliminated, period. Is he being hypocritical?
Well, the dialogue has deteriorated. The notion of chain migration is actually family reunification, a hallmark, a bedrock of immigration law, that families will love and work harder if they're united. And it's a remarkable experience to see this administration who looks at things quite differently. They don't look at the equity that a family has developed in this nation in a puritanical political sense, because he announced that there were going to be raids. Who announces that there are going to be raids? From an operational point of view, I can tell you other mayors and governors are now put in a very difficult position. We have due process. These individuals are on U.S. soil. They have children. They're working. And unless the government wants it catered to their doorstep, they have to get federal warrants. The immigration removal orders that have been entered even in absentia were issued in administrative proceedings, and we have to protect the sanctity, as we saw in the last clip, of people who take refuge in churches. So immigration is now knocking on doors. Don't open them. You don't have to unless they have a warrant. And hence they arrest pizzeria deliverers and all sorts of uncanny things. But this dialogue has really deteriorated if we're calling something that was envisioned constitutionally as a beautiful legend as chain migration, like anchor babies and all the other terrible things.
And in fact, the former Homeland Security Secretary, Jeh Johnson, said this on CBS Today in terms of clarification about raids, what should take place, what kinds of rights migrants should have, and that doors should not be knocked down. This is what he said.
It's important for people to know their rights in this circumstance. If someone from ICRO comes to someone's home, unless they have a warrant, that person is not required to admit them. They have a right to remain silent. They have a right to a lawyer, and they should not be deported from this country unless there has been a final order of deportation by an immigration judge after the individuals had an opportunity to go through the appellate process and make whatever claims for asylum they have.
So, Raul, there's a lot of fear, and is there, the more common thinking that all of those things that Johnson just laid out are being abandoned when you listen to the rhetoric of the president who says, raids are happening this weekend, period?
Right. And people across the United States, people in Latino and immigrant communities are rightly terrified. They're very anxious about these raids. And what is very troubling to me as an attorney is that these raids amount to basically a politically motivated show of force. And we know that because the president first announced these raids at the same time that he announced his 2020 re-election bid. He said that at that point they were going to deport millions. But Jeh Johnson is exactly right. Not only do people have the right not to open their doors if ICE comes, they have the right to remain silent by law. They have, under our Constitution, 5th and 14th Amendment due process rights. And when you look at this from a practical standpoint, even if ICE and DHS were to round up many of these people who have these final orders of deportation, which, by the way, does not necessarily mean that claims have been fully adjudicated, they then have the right to reopen their case, to apply for asylum or other forms of relief. And all that will do will add to the backlog in our immigration courts. If they are sent to detention, we all know that immigration detention is wildly overcrowded. And just from a strategic point of view, I foresee this being a disaster for the administration, because we already know from CNN polling last week, 80% of Americans, including 63% of Republicans, favor allowing undocumented people either legal status or path to citizenship. So it doesn't seem that this is serving any, legitimate practical purpose. And meanwhile, we have this administration on one hand saying they don't have money for toothbrushes and blankets for children at the border, as ICE goes ahead with these aggressive enforcement actions that are going to cost millions of dollars.
So, Michael, is it your feeling that, these raids, that it is a farce and that it is strictly politically motivated, and, that's your conclusion largely because the president has announced that these raids would happen?
Well, first, to add to the gentleman's point, and all well taken, there is going to be collateral damage here, because a lot of these parents have children, and a lot of the children have parents, and then they become wards of the cities and the state to raise them when they all have gainful employment. Now, we are building a wall, and we have a porous border by the Canadian northern border, where I see thousands of people coming in while we're all fixated, and we have 15 million people here, so they're going to go after, and this weekend, 2,000 people. Look, to answer your question, the president has a political agenda. He has availed himself of the immigration visas and systems, and his wife, to her credit, came through independently as well. So he cannot use immigration as a ping pong. It is completely inappropriate.
I'm going to leave it right there, only because we got a hard break that I got to go to. Raul Reyes, Michael Wild, thank you so much.
Pleasure.
Appreciate both.